When Stars Align, which was inspired by a photograph of Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, and Britney Spears from the early 2000s when they were all three kind of rising starlets, and the culture was so obsessed with them, and they were also all friends. And I just thought that is so cool. And the other inspiration actually came from my daughter, who's 18, and she said to me, Paris Hilton is a queen. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's so interesting. It's so different from how these girls were, kind of treated and perceived, when in the 2000s, and now we know how, terrible the culture was to them. So it kind of made me think, about what she said, and then also about, that photograph. And I thought, what if I wrote a story about these girls and their friendship and being, kind of like young and famous, but and having kind of secrets and betrayals, but then also being 40, because seeing them now, and kind of a redemption arc, I thought that was kind of nice. So, and I thought that would be kind of interesting to write about. I kind of work on everything with a big outline, so I kind of knew, where they would end up, and then I kind of work backwards. So, in a way, like my process is like kind of all over the place. So I kind of start with the ending, and then I start with a synopsis basically that I pitch to my editor, and then I fill in kind of a three-act structure. But yeah, this ended up being kind of written, when they were younger, and then kind of we kind of see them every 10 years, and then with a big climax at the end of, everything kind of being revealed and all their friendships either, breaking down or reaffirming. Being in Hollywood, a little bit, and seeing, even how executives talk about stars, and sometimes I'm kind of shocked, these kids are young, but they are in the industry and they're talked about almost like they're adults and gossip about like they're adults. And and I'm a parent, and I think at first I was just a little shocked by that, so I do feel like maybe there is a little bit of revenge there. People who worry about the industry more than, young kids. So Rings of Fate is my first adult romantasy, and it is, we're calling it, my publisher is calling it a Princess Bride meets Wheel of Time. But really, I had pitched this as a sexy Lord of the Rings. And I think, kind of the banter, it's about a barmaid, a snarky barmaid who feels like nobody ever sees her for what she's worth. Everybody just kind of sees her as somebody in the background and somebody you can depend on, but, not like maybe like a romantic heroine. And then a prince with a terrible secret. And they're both kind of these flawed, very kind of sad, not sad, but, they're kind of spunky, but, very flawed human beings who, in the journey together to try to help the prince with his terrible fate, fall in love. And I think I can say that without giving it away. Ditan and Aaron. Oh, I do assign them early on for sure. Ditan was a name that my husband and I, had been kicking around as like a hero in one of our books, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna name the guy in this book Ditan. He was like, oh, okay. So it's just one of those things that we always talk about, like, oh, I kind of like how it looks on the page, it's kind of doesn't reference any culture or language, we just kind of made it up, but it sounds cool. And then Aaron, I kind of like how George R. Martin kind of uses kind of common names with different spellings. So it kind of feels, kind of fantasy. So I thought, oh, I want to call her, Erin, but spell it, with an A.